Hi, it's Katrina. You're about to see some of the most spectacular ruins that have ever been discovered in the jungle. I'll also be talking about monsters, feral humans, and more. So grab your Indiana Jones hat and let's go. The Strange Journeys of Alfred Middleton. In 1753, a group of Portuguese settlers in Brazil went on a voyage deep into the jungle. This group of adventurers came across a lost city in the Bahia state, located in the northeast of the country. I do not know the name of the city. Nobody does. According to the settlers, the nameless city had architecture that was unmistakably Greco-Roman in style. If that's true, it could mean the Romans found Brazil more than 1,000 years ago. Maybe the Romans sent a colony there and built a city in the trees. It sounds like a work of fiction, right? But the story was immortalized in a manuscript that was discovered at the National Library of Brazil in 1839. It's known famously today as the Manuscript 512. The document is real, but there is no evidence the story written on it is. Some Brazilian historians have called it the greatest myth of national archaeology. Others believe Manuscript 512 tells of a real city that is still waiting to be found again. Some of the greatest explorers this world has ever seen were inspired to go hunting for lost cities because of this manuscript. Explorers like Sir Richard Burton and Colonel Percy Fawcett, the latter of which vanished in the jungle and was never seen again. To this day, Percy's fate is a mystery. There is another explorer whose name isn't quite as famous as Percy Fawcett. I tell you now, I'm not even sure he's real. There have been weird pictures floating around on the internet lately of what looks like a primitive alien civilization in the jungle. The pictures, like these ones here, were supposedly taken during an expedition headed by British explorer Alfred Isaac Middleton. The explanation that comes with these photos is that in 1901, Alfred and his team disappeared. They traveled into the Sumatran wilderness of Indonesia in search of the lost city of Dalitu. They were inspired by Manuscript 512. I've saved you the trouble of doing a deep dive by deep diving into the tale of Alfred Middleton myself. It turns out these photographs are AI. In fact, the whole story is made up. The so-called explorer's initials are AI, and the lost city of Dalitu is just a creative way of saying Dal-E-2, the AI software. Even though Alfred is fake, Manuscript 512 remains the real deal. The document was found by naturalist Manuel Pereira Lagos, who presented it to the Brazilian Historic and Geographic Institute. A full copy of the document was published, and then between 1841 and 1846, the Institute sponsored several searches for the lost city. There was a lot of buzz and excitement for about a decade. People truly believed a Greco-Roman ruin would be uncovered in Brazil, but it never happened. After a while, people just sort of gave up. Now, the lost city is considered little more than a myth. A most powerful electric monster. How would you like 860 volts of pure electricity coursing through your body? I don't think most people would, in which case you should stay away from the newly discovered electric eel in the Amazon jungle. This slippery creature has proven to be the most powerful eel in the world. The Amazon rainforest is full of undiscovered creatures, more than you might think. Lead researcher on the new discovery was zoologist David DeSantana from the Smithsonian National Museum of Natural History. He said that even though humans have had such a large impact on the Amazon rainforest over the last 5 decades, it is still possible to discover giant fishes living in its rivers. Prior to this discovery, the world record for strongest electric shock given by an electric eel was 650 volts. The newly identified Electrophorus volti delivers 210 additional volts, positively shattering the record. Did you know the electric eel is not actually an eel? It's a fish that helped inspire the design of the first electric battery. For centuries, scientists thought there was only a single species of electric eel living across the Amazon. They thought it was the same eel, or fish, in Brazil, Guyana, and Suriname. Then David DeSantana came along. He had the brilliant idea of testing the DNA of electric eels in different parts of the jungle. The DNA analysis showed that the fish everyone thought was the same species was in fact 3 completely different species. There are now 3 different electric eels. It's shout-out time! I want to give a big thank you to Mercoyi Mojica from Puerto Rico and Tasso Saros for supporting this channel. Thanks so much for watching and spending time with us. We wouldn't be here without you. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already for more videos like this. The end of the world. A pyramid in the jungle from 1,000 years ago might just hold a clue to the end of the world. This marvelous piece of ancient engineering is in Mexico, in the old domain of the Maya Empire on the Yucatan Peninsula. Welcome to the city of Chichen Itza, one of the most popular tourist destinations in the country. Inside the ancient city is El Castillo, also called the Kukulkan Pyramid. It is a humongous temple with a deep secret. The temple pyramid was dedicated to Kukulkan, one of the most important gods in Mesoamerica. The Aztec even worshipped him, though they called him by a different name, Quetzalcoatl. Regardless of who called the god what, he was the same across Mexico. Kukulkan was the feathered serpent, worshipped as early as 1400 BC by the Olmec civilization. Venerating this deity predates the entire Maya Empire. El Castillo doesn't look much like the pyramids of Egypt. To be entirely honest, it has almost nothing in common with the pyramids from Africa or Mesopotamia. This was not a grave for a king. The pyramid was an actual temple. Each of its 4 sides is a giant staircase leading to a square temple at the top. The temple was likely home to a high priest or a shaman, someone who may have held rituals on important days of the year, specifically on the spring and autumn equinoxes. Twice a year during the equinoxes, the sun hits the temple at such an angle that it creates the illusion of a feathered serpent slithering along the stairs. For the ancient Maya who were in attendance during these ceremonies, it would have seemed to them that their god, Kukulkan, was there with them in shadow form. In 1998, scientific research showed that when you clap your hands near the base of the pyramid, the echo sounds exactly like the chirping of birds. Researchers have been arguing ever since that it was done on purpose. The builders had somehow figured out how to turn human clapping into bird chirps using nothing but their stonework. Here's the fact that most people don't know about the pyramid. When you add all the steps on all 4 sides, it equals 365. There is a step for every day of the year. There are so many mysteries in El Castillo that we could be here all day talking about them, which sounds like a pretty good day to me, but I want to focus on what researchers found underneath it. Researchers discovered tunnels leading to a pit below the temple. It turns out El Castillo was built on a flooded sinkhole known as a cenote in Mexico. It's a gaping black void like a bottomless well. Only it's not bottomless. The cenote is about 65 feet deep. The sinkhole is beyond creepy. The temple is so nice when you're outside in the sun with the blue sky above, but when you go into this temple, below it through a secret passage, suddenly it's dark and clammy. Then the tunnel opens up to a flooded pit that archaeologists think may have been used for human sacrifices. Researchers aren't sure yet, but it is possible the cenote could have something to do with the end of the Mayan calendar. You might already know that people believe the Maya calendar pinpoints the exact date of the apocalypse. It supposedly ran out on December 21st, 2012, but that doomsday didn't come. Over the past decade, researchers have been handing out alternative dates for the Maya apocalypse. They have cited things like the discrepancy between the Julian calendar, the Gregorian calendar, and the Mayan calendar as the reason 2012 was a dud. There was another prediction that the world would end in 2020, and in a way, that one kind of came true. Perhaps the truth of what the Maya knew about the end of time is hidden somewhere under their pyramids in dank, flooded pits. Abandoned in Costa Rica. An abandoned city from ancient times is hidden in the jungles of Costa Rica. This is something you're going to want to hear. I'm always talking about lost cities in Mexico and Guatemala and the Amazon, but Costa Rica rarely comes up. Guayabo de Turrialba is the city's name. It was found decades ago and declared a national monument in 1973. But even after all these years, researchers are still trying to figure out its history. The problem is, they don't know who built it or even how old it is. The civilization responsible for constructing this ancient city left no written records behind. They don't even have a name. Listen to this and try not to be shocked. Scientists believe Guayabo de Turrialba was inhabited at around the same time Jerusalem was founded more than 3,000 years ago. The ruins of the city cover over 540 acres, yet only a tiny bit has been uncovered. Scientists just don't have the means to investigate the site in a meaningful way. They want to, but the isolation and expenses make it tough. There has been some research done, mostly a handful of surveys and excavations. Research has shown that the mysterious society reached its peak in the 9th century AD. Around 10,000 people lived in the city. Archaeologists have found agricultural tools suggesting a farming-based economy. But as for their religion, their gods, and their culture, no evidence of any kind remains. In a way, the lack of evidence is evidence. Archaeologists haven't found anything to suggest the culture here in Costa Rica was violent, for example. There's no proof they practiced human sacrifices like the Maya or the Aztec. They also don't appear to have been hyped on war, preferring a peaceful existence. Then they vanished. By 1400 AD, Guayabo de Turrialba was empty, and it seems to have happened abruptly, with everyone packing up and leaving as if the plague came to town. When the Spanish conquistadors marched through the area during their colonization of the Americas, they didn't even mention the city in their chronicles. If the Spanish did find the ruins, they weren't interesting enough for anyone to write about them. Only in the 19th century did people rediscover the forsaken jungle city. The ruins are nothing short of spectacular. There are stone platforms 76 feet in diameter and almost 10 feet off the ground. Researchers have found evidence of bizarre conical wooden structures looking like weird temples with dunce caps. There have even been cobbled roads found, showing an obviously strong grasp of technology. The roads were lined with monuments, and they even had an advanced hydrological system that prevented flooding and siphoned fresh water into stone tanks. They had real public works. It's all too much to take in at once. So who were these advanced people? And where did they go? If you have any theories, let me know in the comments. Is this thing even real? There is a creature from Indonesian folklore that is so disturbing I debated even telling you about it. But here we go again. This thing is freakish to look at. It has the appearance of a deformed monkey, or maybe a mutated chupacabra. In Indonesian culture and mythology, a jenglot is a doll that used to be a human being. A doll, but also a living creature. It's a little complicated. The myth is that practitioners of dark magic deep in the jungle are able to transform human beings into voodoo-like humanoid dolls. Then those dolls can be brought to life by feeding them blood. If you've ever seen a shrunken head before, jenglots look similar, but add the rest of the body. They're like shrunken people, only around 6 inches long with greasy hair and long fingernails. These dolls supposedly provide protection to their masters, the dark magic users who make them. You can also buy them at markets where people sell the jenglots as good luck charms. How much would you pay for one of these freaky doll creatures? Or maybe a better question is, how much would you pay not to have a jenglot? Nobody knows the truth of these things. Most jenglot specimens have been found in the islands of Java and Sumatra. You can find a few of them in private supernatural researcher collections. While it's easy to dismiss them as hoaxes or superstitious nonsense, many people believe them to be real. Real humans morphed into dolls that now have magic powers. In 2008, Malaysian scientists collected 4 jenglot specimens and performed DNA tests on their hairs. Each specimen was confirmed as having human hair. The crazy part was that the hair came from the same person. Somebody's hairs had been implanted in the jenglot's heads. The Guardians of the Amazon. While I'm on the subject of supernatural entities from the jungle, I'd like to talk about the Yacuruna, the malevolent guardians of the Amazon. In the ancient Quechua language of the Amazon basin, Yacuruna means water people. Throughout the centuries, they have been considered protectors of the jungle and malicious tricksters who occasionally kidnap people. The stories have been passed down through so many generations that the origin of these things has been lost. Here's what I can tell you from the scraps of myth that survive. The Yacuruna live in underwater cities built from beautiful, shining crystals. These are essentially mermaid cities, like in The Little Mermaid. They can be found in the deepest lakes of the Amazon, hidden from humans. The Yacuruna possess incredible abilities. They can transform themselves at will, appearing as a beautiful man or a woman to lure someone to their demise. Their true form is a little more ghoulish. They have eyes that look in different directions, with backward feet. Plus, they have green skin, like the thing from the Black Lagoon. Is there truly a race of reptilian-like mer creatures living in South America? It depends on who you ask. Amazonian shamans seek guidance from the Yakuruna when they perform ayahuasca ceremonies. The shamans claim that without help from Yakuruna, they wouldn't be able to gain spiritual knowledge. Then there are the stories of kidnappings. Countless indigenous tales speak of unsuspecting villagers being dragged into lakes or rivers by the Yakuruna, never to be seen again. Even if the Yakuruna aren't real, what if the stories about them were inspired by something real? Maybe there was a race of creatures in the jungle that scientists have never found proof of. Maybe they were the creatures that built the lost city of Z. It could explain why nobody has ever found it. The Saints' Phantom Island. There is a ghost island in Spain, and someone even took a picture of it. I can't tell you if it's a little spooky or just awesome. You let me know. On a balmy evening in 1957, photographer Manuel Rodriguez was wandering the hillsides of La Palma in the Canary Islands. He gazed out at the Atlantic Ocean and saw something he didn't recognize. There was a silhouette against the setting sun. An island, it looked like. There were two mountain peaks rising high into the clouds. Manuel was stunned. There was no island in the direction he was looking. At least there wasn't supposed to be. What he saw shouldn't have been real. Manuel snapped a photo of the strange island. Before long, it was on the front page of Spanish newspapers across the country. Manuel had captured evidence of a mythical island people had been searching for since the 6th century, a place known as St. Brendan's Phantom Island. More than 1,400 years ago, the mysterious Irish saint set sail in search of a utopia. Brendan believed there was a biblical promised land other than Israel, and you could find it out in the Atlantic. His crew was made up of clerics. On their boat, they voyaged for 7 years, chasing a utopia that always seemed to evade them. But they did find an impossibly big whale. Brendan and his clerics would land on an island only for it to start shaking. They would run away to their boats just in time to see the island sink. After this happened a couple of times, they realized they had found a giant whale with trees growing on its back like a tropical island. The story of the magical whale has most likely been embellished over the centuries. Brendan was real, but his adventures were juiced with bits of fantasy and filled with magical characters. In the 15th century, the Spanish discovered the Canary Islands and colonized them. I say discovered, but there were indigenous people already there. The indigenous people ended up in a bad situation, but that's a tragic tale for another day. The Canary Islands soon became a hub for colonial adventurers. Many of the adventurers saw the exact same thing as Manuel Quintero in 1957. They witnessed an island just off the coast that shimmered in the distance like a mirage. It looked like a possible Atlantis hiding behind a smokescreen of magic. Modern scholars think St. Brendan witnessed the same thing as the European adventurers and Manuel, only it wasn't a magical island they were all seeing. It was most likely an optical illusion. Scientists have never been able to find the physical island all these people have seen. They have never found the island Manuel Quintero photographed in 1957. They think it's a trick of the eye, yet they can't come up with a cause for the illusion. It's the same mirage that everyone sees, and there is no scientific explanation behind it. Jotunheim, the realm of giants. There are 9 realms in Norse mythology. There is Asgard, home of the Aesir gods like Thor, Odin, and Loki, and then there is Midgard, home of mortal men. There's the realm of Alfheim, where the wise and beautiful Nordic elves lived, and Muspelheim was believed to be a place of fire and roaring volcanoes. Helheim was the land of the dead, the Norse version of Hades. Let's not forget Nidavellir, land of the dwarves, Niflheim, realm of ice and fog, and the most mysterious realm, Vanaheim, mentioned in the Nordic sagas so rarely that nobody even knows what the realm contained. It's been suggested it was home of the Vanir gods, including Freyr and Freya. Most important of all was Jotunheim, land of giants. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised to learn that Jotunheim is a real place. You can go there right now. I'll tell you how in just a second. In Norse mythology, the frost giants are known as Jotun. Their home world is one of magic and chaos. The giants and the magical monsters of Jotunheim are at the center of almost all major Nordic myths. They were always threatening Midgard and Asgard with their terrible power. Jotunheim is in southern Norway, part of the Scandinavian mountains. The 29 highest peaks in Norway are in Jotunheim. It's a literal land of giants. It's a place where today you'll find hikers and climbers exploring the snowy slopes and cold, high-altitude lakes. You won't find any real giants, and likely no gods either, but it is a real realm that people lived in more than 4,000 years ago. In August of 2006, archaeologists found a leather shoe from 1800 BC in the Jotunheim permafrost. It's still considered the oldest article of clothing ever found in Scandinavia. It was found alongside arrows and tools. In ancient times, Jotunheim must have felt like a real mythical place to the people who lived there. Hawaiki, the realm of the Maori gods. Hawaiki is either a real island, a mythical realm, or a bit of both. The legendary place is said to be the original homeland of New Zealand's Maori people. They left Hawaiki in ancient times and sailed to new lands. Then, over the next few centuries, the Maori slowly forgot the precise location of where they came from. Lucky for you. To track down the real land of Hawaiki, the birthplace of the Maori civilization, we need to dig deep into their colorful mythology. The Maori claim Hawaiki was the place where the supreme being known as Io created the world and its people. If you want to compare it to something biblical, Hawaiki was the Garden of Eden. Io was the Maori's version of God, or Yahweh, or Allah, or if it makes you more comfortable, you can think of Io as the Polynesian Zeus. Io created Hawaiki Island and then made the people, starting with the first woman. Unlike the myths of Abrahamic religions like Christianity and Judaism, Io made women before men. The first woman's name was Hineahuone. Io fashioned her from the soil of Hawaiki. When all the people were made, they left to populate the world. This left the mythical island to be the private home of the gods. One of the gods that lived there was the Maori version of Loki, the trickster god known as Maui throughout Polynesia. Hawaiki is still a large part of the Maori belief system. It appears in their traditional songs and proverbs. It's said that when a person dies, their spirit returns to the island of their ancestors. When their spirit gets to those sacred shores, they either turn into a bird or get dragged down into the underworld. Let's hope most people turn into birds. That's the myth, but what about the real physical location? Many scholars believe Hawaiki is in fact the island of Raiatea, which is part of Tahiti. It's an ancient and spiritual place that could have been the birthplace of the Maori. The Maori arrived in New Zealand from parts unknown around 1250 AD. When they got there, no other humans had ever laid eyes on the island. Just think about how awesome that would have been to be the very first human to step foot in a place like New Zealand. Remember where they filmed Lord of the Rings? You would have seen a pristine ecosystem rich in unspoiled biodiversity. It would have been like stepping back in time to the Cretaceous period. In any case, the Maori reached New Zealand on purpose. They navigated seaworthy canoes as part of a campaign of discovery. They were looking for new lands with the same determination that Spain was trying to find an easier route to India. But where did the Maori start? Some think it was Raiatea. Others have suggested India, Mesopotamia, or even Mexico. Prisoners of the Trojan War. Archaeologists think they found the mythical city of Troy in Hisarlik in Turkey. Not only would this be absolutely incredible if it's true, it could also confirm that the Trojan War was a real event. It may not have transpired just as Homer wrote more than 2,500 years ago. It likely didn't happen as shown in that movie with Brad Pitt either. But the archaeological evidence does suggest a massive city was burned by the Greeks and destroyed. The legend of the Trojan War might have been inspired by real conflicts or events that occurred at Hisarlik or surrounding areas. It's possible that these events could have been slightly embellished over time. Archaeologists also unearthed a lost city that may have been built by prisoners taken during that war. Archaeologist Dr. Elena Korkas completed a systematic investigation of Tanea, revealing unbelievable secrets of the ancient Trojans. It all started in 2017 with the release of some aerial photographs of what looked like ruined houses. These houses turned out to be part of a 3,000-year-old settlement in Corinth, Greece. The legend is that after the Trojan War was over, the victorious Greeks took prisoners back to Greece with them as slaves. They then forced the beaten Trojans to build a new city. That city survived for centuries, well into the Roman era. Archaeologists have found bones, jewelry, burial grounds, coins, riches beyond imagining. Yet there is hardly any mention of Tanea in ancient historical sources. Could these ruins really have been built by enslaved Trojans like the legend says? The discovery of Troy is a major breakthrough in the world of archaeology. While the details of the Trojan War remain uncertain, it highlights a significant period in the region's history. The investigation of Tanea adds another layer to the story, with the possibility of a connection to the Trojan War legend. The Valley of the Nymphs. In ancient Greek myth, Nysa was the birthplace of Dionysus, god of wine and ritual madness. Some believe that Dionysus was an earlier rendition of Jesus Christ, but more of a party animal. Many of Jesus' famous traits are identical to those of the wine god. You might say the Christians stole a lot of aspects of the Greek myth. For example, Jesus and Dionysus are depicted with long, flowing hair. Dionysus wore a crown of thorns centuries before Jesus Christ was crucified. Dionysus even had his own disciples, just like Christ. Nysa was also the place where Persephone was kidnapped by Hades, lord of the underworld, and forced to be his wife for 6 months of the year. This rather rude kidnapping upset Persephone's mother, Demeter. I think most mothers would be upset by their daughter being dragged to the underworld against her will. Demeter happened to be the goddess of harvest and agriculture and the fertility of the earth. Without her, humans could not survive. With her daughter gone, Demeter stopped tending the garden of the world. Winter fell as the plants withered and died. Spring only came when Hades agreed to return Persephone to the land of the living for 6 months out of the year. Nysa was also home to the mythical rain nymphs. Zeus entrusted these beautiful, supernatural women with the care of Dionysus when he was an infant. They were known as the Nysiades or the Hyades and were sort of like nurses to the gods. Now let's take a look at the reality. Nysa may have been a real place. It was said to be a mountainous district of immense beauty, but nobody knows where it truly was. Some have guessed Nysa was a magical valley in Ethiopia or maybe in Thrace. British philologist Sir William Jones suggested Nysa was a mountain in India. What's interesting about Nysa being in India is that there is a real city called Nysa in India. It's in the northwest and was visited by Alexander the Great. When Alexander arrived with his great army of Greeks and Macedonians, representatives from the city begged him not to destroy them. They said it was sacrilege to capture the city because it was where Dionysus had been born. The mysterious city of Beringen. Beringen means place of lost people. Much like the strange island in the Atlantic, this city is a phantom. It's a mystical hidden city deeply rooted in the religious folklore and mythology of the Philippines. The Philippines is filled with stories and legends just like everywhere else, but you rarely ever hear about them. The lost city of Beringen is like their version of Atlantis, only a little spookier. Those who do find this fantastical place never leave. The legend is that when you enter Beringen, your fate is sealed. That's because the city is home to the Encantos. The Encantos are sort of like elves, only mixed with aliens and restless spirits. In Filipino mythology, these creatures can shapeshift and cause great harm to humans. They are very mischievous and often bloodthirsty. The Encantos live in a parallel world that can see everything going on in the human realm, kind of like fairies. They're always eavesdropping on people and know if you're talking smack about them. If you start asking local people in rural parts of the Philippines about Baringin and the Encantos, they might totally ignore you out of fear. The Lost City is supposed to be somewhere on Samar, the third biggest island in the Philippines, but the exact location is unknown. Everyone has a different idea of where the ghost city stands, and nobody really wants to look for it. Locals tend not to venture out into the darkness, lest they find the city by accident and never leave. The Irish Otherworld of Mag Mell. The last one was a bit creepy, so let's lighten things up with an otherworldly paradise from Irish lore. It's called Mag Mell, a land of unending springtime and warm golden sunlight. The trees bear magical fruits. Divine mead fills cups and keeps everyone happily drunk. Does that sound like your kind of paradise? If so, you just have to find the way to get there. Mag Mell isn't the easiest place to locate. It is full of immortal heroes who only entered by dying a glorious death in battle. Mag Mell is the Irish Valhalla, where the souls of Vikings who fell with sword in hand went when they died. Only those who deserved an eternal life of bliss can get through the front gates. It's like trying to get into heaven. But is it real? In the physical realm, absolutely not. Nobody has ever been able to find a place on this planet where people live for all eternity with endless amounts of mead. That being said, the Irish thought it was a real physical place. The ancient Celts who lived in Ireland centuries ago thought Mag Mell was an earthly paradise. They didn't think it was like Valhalla up in the clouds or like the Christian version of heaven. They believed that when they died, their soul traveled through a portal to a distant place on Earth where they lived forever. Thanks for watching! Which of these ancient places do you wish existed the most? Let me know in the comments below. And if you want to see more like this, be sure to stick around for an older video that you might have missed.
Relics in the Lost City. The great lost city of Palenque was discovered by the Spanish in 1567. The local Maya called the city Otolum, meaning a land with strong houses. The Spanish translated this to Palenque, which means fortification in Spanish. At the time of its discovery, the Maya had already abandoned this place for centuries. It was already a ruin, in about the same state as it is today. And all these years later, researchers at the National Institute of Anthropology and History in Mexico have discovered something extremely unique. They have found a representation of the corn god hiding in these jungle ruins. The ruins of the city have only been about 10% explored over the past 500 years. We know about the big buildings, like the Temple of Inscriptions and the mysterious burial chamber of the Red Queen. But the truth is that there are way more, over 1,400 structures already documented, spanning 1,800 hectares of land. It was recently, while the researchers were looking at the palace where the Red Queen was buried, that they found a hidden corridor. Inside the corridor was the severed stucco head of the corn god lying in a small pond. Researchers say it was probably placed on the floor of the pond and then sealed inside of a stucco enclosure as a way to simulate the god entering the underworld, probably as an attempt to make it rain. The ancient path. Researchers have just begun revealing one of the largest ancient pathways in the world, and it's hiding in the jungles of South America. This trail is extremely old, going back over 1,000 years, and actually connects the Pacific Ocean to the Atlantic. It's about 2,500 miles long, and was originally carved by the indigenous people who called the jungle home. The name of this secret ancient path is the Camino de Peabiru, once used by the native Guarani people in Brazil as a spiritual road that supposedly led to a mythical paradise. When European colonizers arrived on the continent, they used the same path to bring riches from one side of South America to the other. Most of the original paths have already disappeared, either totally overgrown by the jungle or transformed into modern highways. It was only in the past few years the researchers started really focusing on uncovering what was once the biggest road in the world. From what we know, thanks to historical records, it was the Portuguese sailor Aleixo Garcia who first used the path to walk from southern Brazil to the Andes Mountains in Peru. He was shipwrecked in 1516, was taken in by the Guarani people, and they showed him the trail which they said led to a mysterious empire in the mountains, rich with gold and silver. This mysterious empire ended up being the Inca, and after walking roughly 2,000 miles, Garcia became the first European to ever behold the Inca. This was over a decade before the Spanish conquistadors arrived. Lost cities of Bolivia. About 2 decades ago, researchers from the German Archaeological Institute began excavations on some mysterious mounds near the small village of Casarabe in Bolivia. This is right at the fringe of the Amazon jungle, on a savanna plain which floods every few months out of the year. It didn't strike the researchers as a smart place to build a permanent settlement, and yet they discovered traces of habitation prior to the 16th century. They also found causeways and canals leading for miles across the savanna, seemingly to nowhere. All these years later, researchers have returned to learn more about the Casarabe culture. They believe this culture flourished here in Bolivia between 500 and 1400 AD. The mounds, which were originally excavated, were actually eroded pyramids. They were basically stumps of melted stone and mud that had once been huge pyramid structures. To get to the bottom of just how big this society was, researchers used light detection and ranging technology to survey the terrain. This involved a laser scanner attached to a helicopter, sending laser pulses across the ground. This method revealed 2 massive sites that were once great cities. These lost cities at the fringe of the jungle were between 147 and 315 hectares and could have held thousands and thousands of people. We have no idea what happened to this mysterious society. They had clearly built cities that could rival those of the Inca or the Maya, and yet every last trace, other than the marks they've left on the ground, is gone. The Secret Pyramid of Samoa. Hidden deep in the thick and tangled jungle of Samoa, a rocky footpath recently led archaeologists to one of the most mysterious secrets in the South Pacific. Researchers found 80 ancient star mounds, platforms built in the shapes of many pointed stars. These enormous platforms were abandoned about 300 years ago, and they are baffling experts. Researchers don't know exactly what they were used for, why they were abandoned, or really anything else about them. The few details scientists do know are that these star mounds are some of the oldest and largest structures anywhere in the region of Polynesia. They were probably pyramids with flat tops, molded to have 8 points in mimicry of the stars above, and they were built starting around the year 1000. The rest is a total mystery. Archaeologists have suggested these star-shaped pyramids could have been used for pigeon snaring competitions, public meetings, or religious ceremonies. They could even be burial chambers, and there could be bodies hiding deep underneath. The mounds were most certainly built by a pre-colonial society that flourished before Europeans arrived in 1722. It also shows that the Samoan population was likely far larger than anyone believed. It's now looking like colonialism wiped out around 80 to 90% of the people in Samoa, destroying their culture and heritage with them. Lost Indian settlement. The ancient remains of a settlement from the 13th century were recently discovered hiding in a jungle in India, in Arunachal Pradesh. Researchers found a massive rampart made from stone blocks over 742 feet long, along with the eroded stone of a huge gateway. Even more interesting is that they found symbols that appear to be bows, arrows, and tridents inscribed on the remains of the rampart. They found the remains of broken stone pillars, burnt bricks once used in the creation of some great fortress, and the scant vestiges of huge stone staircases that must have once led to tall temples or other buildings. This entire region is known as the land of Papum Pare, and it's a mountainous place in the Himalayas covered in lush forest, deep river valleys, and sprawling plateaus where humans rarely visit. Clearly, this mountainous jungle region was once home to a major culture around the time that Genghis Khan was rampaging across Russia. Researchers even found a path made from bricks that came from the Stone Age, 5,000 years ago. Nobody knows who these people were. They have no name, and their mountain cities have been reduced to crumbling rock fragments. Researchers like Pura Koji, who is involved in all of the excavations here, says they need more time and more information before they can get to the bottom of this strange mystery. Big shout out to Relaxing Music by Daddy Loki and Lori Carter. Thanks so much for watching and supporting Origins Explained. If you are new here, be sure to subscribe and join the family. Lost Maya City in the Yucatan. Archaeologists in Mexico have discovered yet another lost city of the Maya, this time during construction work at an industrial park. The work was going down near the capital of the Yucatan in Mérida, and the new city is estimated to be at least 1,400 years old. Researchers have named it Xol, and they say it flourished from between 600 to 900 during one of the most epic periods in Maya history. This was a time when the Maya city-states were vying for power, with a complicated network of enemies and alliances making up the kingdom. Then, in the 9th century, the Maya world fragmented from within, and the entire civilization slowly collapsed. This led to the abandonment of many cities, the end of all the royal dynasties, and mass migration to the north. It was during this time when Xol was left deserted. Researchers first identified the lost city in 2015 and have been excavating ever since. They've uncovered the remains of massive palaces, huge plazas where citizens gathered in celebration, stone altars that may have been used in sacrifices, and even a cenote where the Maya dumped ritual offerings to their gods. 38 funerary deposits have also been uncovered, revealing exceptional information about the inhabitants and their burial customs. The funerary deposits contained burial goods like jewelry and flint tools, showing how the Maya here cared greatly about sending off their dead with lots of supplies. The abundance of marine animal bones shows that the people probably ate a hearty diet of fish. Lost Mountain Temple. Deep in the jungle of Thailand, an ancient stone temple has been discovered. The temple was found amidst the ruins of a large settlement that dates back to around the 6th century BC. Historians are calling it the City of Mountains. The researchers first heard a rumor about a system of ruins hiding in the jungle in 2017, but only recently managed to cut their way through the dense foliage, climb halfway up a mountain, and discover the remains. And when I say remains, I mean it. There was almost nothing left when the researchers arrived except tons of rock. Most people wouldn't even have realized they were standing in the remains of what had been a city 2,500 years ago. History tells us that the region has been a major production hub of jewelry, wood, and tin since 500 BC. This settlement was probably part of a larger network of communities spread across the Gulf of Siam that traded with kingdoms much farther away. In fact, the settlement may have even grown to be a massive city-state with its own rulers by the 13th century. What this means is that the scattered rocks, the very few building blocks still left to document, once belonged to one of the oldest cities in Thailand. The temple discovered was probably a sanctuary built around the year 775, dedicated to the Buddha. There is still a lot more exploring to do, since only about 5% of the total site has been excavated. Centuries left alone has allowed the jungle to totally swallow the place. The great medieval cities of the Khmer. Archaeologists in Cambodia have come across medieval cities hiding in the jungle. These cities were found near the famous temple complex of Angkor Wat, which was arguably the greatest jungle city ever built by human hands. Because of how dense and impassable the jungle here is, researchers had to rely on new technology to identify the structures. They used laser scans to reveal cities dating back as far as 1,400 years ago, completely overgrown by the tropical forest floor. Some of these ancient cities are nearly the size of the modern capital of Phnom Penh. Researchers scanned about 734 square miles of jungle and identified multiple populated cities, which when put together make up the largest empire anywhere on the planet in the 12th century. The Khmer Empire truly was the biggest, greatest, and most fearsome of them all, even if they weren't quite as advanced as many other societies at the time. Their cities were large and very populated. The biggest mystery is trying to figure out where all the people went. Until recently, it was believed that the Thais invaded Cambodia, pushed the Khmer out of Angkor Wat, and everyone fled south. Considering these cities survived long after Angkor, that theory may not be true. We don't know what happened 800 years ago in this hot, sweltering jungle. Borneo jungle paintings. There is a mysterious cave in Borneo, hiding in the jungle of Southeast Asia, which hides a seemingly miraculous secret. There is a painting inside this cave, which dates back 40,000 years. There are a lot of paintings in the cave, with artwork showing species of wild cattle, humans doing some kind of ritualistic dance, and much more. It's been quite the interesting discovery for archaeologists, since it proves that cave art didn't begin in Europe as was previously believed. Instead, some of the oldest artists in the world may have lived in the Indonesian province of Borneo. Not much else was discovered inside the cave system. Nobody lived here, but instead climbed to the forested peaks of small mountain-like rocks for the sole purpose of creating art. They basically had to mountain climb up sheer rock to reach the mouth of the cave without any kind of equipment, just so that they could draw hand stencils and paintings of animals. And they may have been doing it years before anyone in Europe began making their own cave paintings. Calakmul. Just a few miles from the border of Guatemala, in one of the biggest tropical forests anywhere in the Americas, there is a ruin called Calakmul. It's one of the most mysterious Maya ruins in Mexico today, hidden inside of a biosphere reserve which is protected by the government. There are almost no tourists down here. Nobody is allowed to pillage the jungle of its resources, and so the ruins have remained relatively untouched. This city dates back much earlier than most of the more famous Maya ruins. Many of the biggest abandoned cities in Mexico were built sometime around 600 AD and then abandoned between 900 and 1000 AD. But Calakmul was built over a millennium earlier, around 550 BC. It did reach its height at around the same time as the other Maya cities, between 250 and 900, and then was totally empty by 1000. It was around the year 636 that Calakmul had its most challenging period. The city had already developed an extensive political network, only to be defeated by the Maya rulers at Tikal. The city continued to thrive, but the political upheaval was major. At its peak, the population of Calakmul was about 1.5 million, and the final mysterious fact about the city is that even though it was abandoned by the year 1000, it wasn't totally forgotten. From between 1000 and 1500 AD, Calakmul was a pilgrimage site. Before the Spanish came, nearby villagers would bring offerings and dump them inside the unmaintained temples and pyramids to appease the gods. Thanks for watching! Which jungle-dwelling ancient civilization do you think was the most impressive? Let me know in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. See you next time! Bye!